When it comes to talking about the most beautifully photographed films of all time, In the Mood for Love always makes it into the conversation. The strong use of composition, artistic use of colour and subtle elegance all make it one of the most striking films of the 21st century. So before we start, let's mention the elephant in the room, because there are 3 listed cinematographers on In the Mood for Love: Mark Lee Ping Bin, Pun Liang Kwan and Christopher Doyle. Now, when there are this many cinematographers on a film, it becomes impossible to tell who shot what. However, Christopher Doyle has collaborated 7 times with kar-wai, each time being the primary cinematographer, so I think it's safe to say that both he and kar-wai created the look and the other 2 followed it. So, in today's video, I'm going to be covering the equipment Doyle used, how he and kar-wai crafted the romantic look, as well as the use of lighting, colour and composition in order to create that look. Starting off with the equipment, on a film like this, Doyle needed to be able to set up quickly and move swiftly, as kar-wai is known for his hectic schedules and changes to the script on the day of shooting. So, as for the cameras, Doyle went with the Arriflex 35BL4 and 535. Now, the 535 is actually the replacement for the BL4 line and was famous for its widespread use as the primary camera on films, music videos, commercials and special effects work. It even won Arion Engineering Award in 1995. As for the BL4, this is one of the quietest film cameras out there, and that's why this line is so famous. Now, when it comes to the lenses, the only information I could find online is that Doyle used Zeiss's lenses, but we can make educated guesses, and mine is that he used their standard speed primes. They were very popular in the 90s, often used with the same cameras that Doyle was using, have an organic sharpness, are reasonably lightweight, and are relatively fast at t2.1. It's also the lens that he used on Days of Being Wild, the first film in the unofficial trilogy that includes 2046. However, it could have also been their super speeds. As for the stock, it's no surprise that Doyle opted for Kodak, going with their Vision 500T 5279 and 800T 5289. What is there to say about these stocks though? They're Kodak, so they're reliable. He used tungsten as most films did, although what's interesting is the utilisation of 800T, but when you look into the characteristics of a stock that's fast, of deep colours, a reddish glow and dark blacks, we can see that it's quite a distinct and exact look that he was after. So first of all, let's look at a couple of other films with the so-called romantic look: The Before Trilogy and Roman Holiday. Now, something both of these films, or more specifically all 4 of these films, have in common is the fact that the camera just exists. Sure, we could interpret that the cinematography is playing a character, but in these films, it's just there. But how does this compare to In the Mood for Love? Well, how the characters are photographed together, the way they are looking at one another, how we are looking at them. These are the aspects that, in my opinion, are a staple of this look. Yes, the colour is an aspect, but we don't have that in Roman Holiday. Now, something that is interesting to me is how we are watching the characters quite closely, but how it's been photographed, it feels like it's from afar. The biggest reason for this is due to the heavy utilisation of frames within frames, as well as watching people through curtains, windows and plants. Now, I think this quote from Doyle fully explains why we feel that we are watching them. The film is of and celebrates our Hong Kong world. In our world, there is no such thing as the Western concept of privacy, except, as I think the film conceded, in the privacy of your own head. As for the use of colour, to say it's prominent here is an understatement. We have whole walls of red, whole frames of blue, orange light, green blinds, and these are all very specific colours, even if they are a bit stereotypical. Now, to look at the meaning of colour thematically, let's start with red, and we all know where this is going. Because red is usually correlated with love and passion. Of course, it could also imply danger, but it really doesn't here. The use of orange usually hints at a sense of warmth and friendliness, and blue generally expresses isolation and melancholy, especially in this situation. Now, finally, the composure of characters is something that really stands out. They are often to the side of the frame, lack breathing space, are surrounded by negative space, and more often than not, are in some sort of frame within a frame. But what does this do to create the romantic look? Well, to me it signifies mystery between the characters. There are times where we know they're thinking about each other, and the only way to show that is in the breathing room and how isolated they are. So, what is the lighting style of In the Mood for Love? Well, I like to think of it as the perfect example of subtle artistic lighting, but let me break this down quickly because that doesn't make too much sense. Now, what do I mean by artistic? Well, I mean that it's not realistic. Of course, there are aspects of realism, such as in the bedroom and apartment in general. However, the lighting outside is just too abstract to be classified as true to life. There's a lot of colour, which I'll touch on in a second, the lighting is relatively harsh, there's a good amount of smoke or fog, and it just seems more like a dream than anything else. But more about the lighting, throughout it tends to be really hard, and in that some really nice shadows are created, not only on our characters' faces, but also on the walls behind them. Now, this could be for a number of reasons, however my favourite is that it creates a sense of mystery in the story. We know our characters are going behind their partner's back, and that darkness is a great way of telling a story through images. As for the use of colour, we mainly see it in the production design and lighting. I'm going to say the most prominent use of it is with the curtains and wallpapers with the strong uses of reds and blues, and then in the lighting, the hints of oranges and blues. Now, as I talked about the thematic use earlier, I'm only going to be looking at how you'd use colour here. Well, to start, in the weirdest way possible, it's subtle. Having a huge red curtain or looking through a pale blue one makes the colour a part of the set. It isn't being introduced to it, even though it would have been behind the scenes. Doing this allows the filmmaker to create a more distinct feeling, but in a very subtle way, or as subtle as you can get when half of the frame is one colour. As for using it in lighting, this is a great way to cast a character with an emotion if you don't have control of the surroundings. For example, when you're out on the street, in a car, or if we're talking about a low-budget film, just anywhere. Now, when it comes to the composition in the Mood for Love, I don't think it's possible to find a film from this era with more impactful composure. I've already touched on this today, so here I'm only going to be looking at the use of frames within frames, but I just thought it was important to reiterate how effective it was. Now, what is a frame within a frame? Well, it's exactly that. You use something within the frame to then frame the subject. The most common culprits are doorways, windows, but Doyle really used anything he could in this. Walls, mirrors, curtains, booths and restaurants to tell a story. Now, what might that story be? Well, we can imply that it separates our characters, which it does. It also separates us from them. If there's a barrier in the frame, it's more like we are onlookers and are observing them rather than actually being with them. The other use is that it helps guide the eye of the viewer, which is especially helpful if the director is trying to tell you something. It's also one of the easiest composition tools to use to make your cinematography more interesting, as long as you don't overdo it. So overall, the cinematography of In the Mood for Love is observing. We are close to the characters, but we are removed from them. The use of colour helps us imply a certain feeling, whether that's romance, mystery or suspicion, and the way in which the characters are framed creates a sense of empathy, but also sincerity. In my opinion, this is one of the few films that undoubtedly deserves the title of a work of art. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Notice if you did. If you have a recommendation for an analysis, leave it down below. Thanks so much for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time. Bye.